Okay, so from last week, what was the most important hadith or most important quote for you? Ahmed, what do you think? What was the most important thing from last week? Ahmed, can you hear me? Okay, Sister Sharifa, can you hear me? Okay, so what was the biggest thing that stood out to you from the from last week? Most important thing. Okay, being able to eat birds, and then they become okay. That there's no suffering. Hmm. So for me, the most important thing was that quote about the quote about what was it? About the angels working, right? Was it about um angels working? Where was it? Trying to find that quote now. Find it. Are the angels working building? It's like maybe it's under castles, rivers, about trees. Where was it? All right, there was this one. Maybe don't know if we read this last week. There was this one here where Hassan he said, um, Hassan al-Basri was down here. Hassan al-Basri he said, the Prophet ﷺ said the angels work for the children of Adam in paradise, planting and building. If they stop, they are asked why they have stopped. They reply, what's their reply? That the angels have stopped building for you. Exactly. Dhikr, right? They can only continue when provided with materials. To this, Hassan said, "Let my father and mother be ransomed for you. Set them to work, i.e., give them the materials." One of the righteous saw. Where is it? No, it was like they stop when you stop making dhikr. Where was it? Set them to work. Oh, that was this one here. The flaws of a building in paradise are built using dhikr. If a person stops making dhikr, the buildings will stop building. Yeah. That's an amazing thing, right? Okay, so we're now on to 72. It says a description of the spouses of paradise. And so it's important to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not male. Okay? Allah is not male. However, uh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made certain structures in this world based around men, right? So I'm going to be very, very blunt, because there's so many people just who won't be blunt, right? And so it is true, right? And forgive me if I'm wrong, that if men do not control women, women will be controlled by somebody else. I'm not talking as a sheikh, I'm talking about an observer of life. If men don't control women, meaning there isn't a hierarchy and there isn't a patriarchy, then women will be controlled by others, right? So case in point, was it Torches of Liberty? Let me find this right. Torches of Liberty. Let's find it. Torches of Freedom. 1929. There we go. So Torches of Freedom was a 1929 public relations camp that involved women marching in an Easter parade in New York City, smoking cigarettes. The campaign was a feminist protest against the social taboo of women smoking and aimed to change public perception of smoking as a symbol of emancipation and equality with men. Right? Who was behind it? Right? The cousin or the nephew of Freud. So what was happening outwardly is women were liberating themselves. What was actually happening is women were being controlled in another way, right? So the women's lib is the best example of why we need patriarchy, because the women's liberation of womanhood, whatever it is in the West, has totally debased women. Has totally debased women. So the fact that a woman, for example, she feels she has power by exposing her body in the workplace and in the street, and it's kind of an expression of her power. In reality, you've just made her the visual prostitute of every single person that sees her. That's what you've done to her. And if you tell her that, then she says, no, 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 I'm free to do what I want. So she was duped into freeing herself by making her a slave to everybody, right? And so it's important to understand that, right? I might be wrong. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but that's what I have observed, right? That's what I have observed is that the point of women, men having certain control, not absolute control, but certain control of women, is to protect them because they will be abused by others, right? That's the reality of it. That's the harsh reality of life. And forgive me if I'm wrong. So part and parcel of that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given men a certain status and also made men different to women. They're not the same, right? So being equal in Allah's eyes means that they have an equal access to Allah's good pleasure to get close to Allah. It doesn't make them the same, right? They're not the same. They don't look at things in the same way at all. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of that respect and out of keeping respect for the system, or keeping that system that he has put in place in the dunya, which is patriarchy, he has given certain respect, so to speak, to men, protected men in a certain way, and he has not spoken about the rewards that women have in paradise in explicit terms. So the rewards of paradise are somewhat male centric in that you're talking about women. It's like, well, what about from a woman, right? How is that, right? So the answer is, why would Allah not mention that in the Quran? The answer is, it's inappropriate. Meaning it's not in keeping with the patriarchic system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in this dunya. But let's just be honest though, right? The Prophet ﷺ, and there's a whole topic to talk about, the Prophet ﷺ, he told us that women are the full sisters of men, shaqiqat, right? or shaqa'iq, right? The full sisters, meaning you're 100% like a man, right? A woman is 100% like a man in terms of she's interested in what men are interested in. In fact, there's a weak hadith that mentions that 90% of all lust has been given to women, right? I.e., so their interest in the opposite sex is way more than men's, but it's just been covered by haya. It's been covered by their shyness. So women have a shyness that covers that, but in reality, they're more interested in the opposite sex than men are. However, it's not of haya to talk about that. There are certain hadith that indicate some things, but generally speaking, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has left it vague and said, لَهُمْ مَا يَشَاءُونَ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ. They have whatever they will wish for in the eyes of their Lord. Now, one problem though, right? They have whatever they want, leave it like that, don't go into details. One problem though, or one thing that it seems pretty clear to me, is just as there is only, what's the word? What's the word for it? There's polygyny and polygamy. I think the word is not polygamy. It's poly. There's another word for it. Having only one husband. Polyandry. Monoandry. Monoandry. Is that right? Monoandry. Oh shit. Google again. Monoandry. Yeah. Monoandry. Right. So polyandry is when women have more than one husband. So just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made, there's no such thing as polyandry in the dunya for obviously physical reasons, right? There's physical reasons why you could have polygyny, a man having more than one wife or being intimate with more than one female, because lineage is clear, whereas in polyandry doesn't work, right? It doesn't work on an emotional level and it doesn't work on a physical level. In paradise site, why not? What's the problem? As far as I know, that is not the case in paradise. For a number of reasons. For example, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned was asked by I believe Salama, I think it was, or maybe another Sahabiya. She said, if a woman had more than one husband in the dunya, right? She was married twice. Who will she be with in Jannah, right? So in her mind, she's asking the question, there's only one. I'm not going to be with more than one man in Jannah. Right? And then the Prophet ﷺ mentions the person who has best akhlaq to her. Right? So Allahu Alam, is that something crystal clear? Is that part of Aqidah? I don't know. Right? But that's the general picture. Right? But it's important thing, these are very important things to talk about. Right? These are very important things to talk about because if you just leave them there, the shaitan has things to say. Right? So it's not the time to talk about all of these things here. But again, the 2 points are what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made a system in the dunya, has made a process. Men and women have equal access to get as close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put men in charge to protect women. And that's called patriarchy. And part of patriarchy is respecting the ghayra, respecting the jealousy, so to speak, the protective jealousy of men. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wouldn't mention things like, oh, women will have this and this and this in paradise. Right? It doesn't fit that whole thing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give women whatever they want in Jannah and more. But as far as I know, there is no such thing as polyandry in Jannah. As far as I know. Allahu A'lam. Inshallah, we'll all get there and find out. Ya Rab. So description of the spouses of paradise. Regarding spouses of paradise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they will have pure spouses. The word pure here means pure from menstruation, excrement, phlegm, and saliva. Busaq, not saliva. Spit, I think the word is not saliva, right? That would be a bit difficult to not have saliva in your mouth. So the word is spit or spittle, right? He also declared, and they will have maidens with gorgeous eyes, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even the verse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes certain things about the women, doesn't describe every single thing about the women. Right? There's certain things that could be described that are identifiable as beautiful, and other things that are innately sexual and not spoken about, right? And so beautiful eyes, that's not something that's innately sexual, right? So there are certain things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Kareem, you can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is noble and beautiful, and He says things in indirect ways, right? Um, so they have so hurun ain, right? So the word ain is from the word eye, right? They have beautiful eyes, right? And so we should be very, very careful. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is praising these women because of their beautiful eyes, then how should we be about our eyes in the dunya? Should we be wearing mascara? Should we be, I don't know, wearing, I don't know what they can, however you can beautify your eyes in public? The answer is no, right? So we shouldn't be doing things like that. We should be, because the most beautiful thing of a person generally is their eyes, right? And so, we should be careful with these things and the woman should hide her beauty and keep it for her husband, whether he deserves it or not, because her relationship with her husband is a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, a young, beautiful, fair-skinned woman with intensely deep black eyes. Zayd ibn Aslam said, Al-Hawra, that's a singular, is someone with by whom others are mesmerized. Right? All right. Ayn refers to women with beautiful eyes. Right. So you look at her, mesmerizably beautiful and beautiful eyes. Mujahid, so these are all early, Zayd ibn Aslam, the Tabi'i, teacher of Imam Malik. Mujahid, student of Ibn Umar, he said, Al-Hawra is someone with whom others are mesmerized due to her soft skin and pure complexion. Hassan said, Al-Hawra is someone who has eyes, the white of which are intensely white, and the blacks of which are intensely black. A woman is only referred to as Hawra if, in addition to this attribute regarding her eyes, she is also fair-skinned. Uh, in Ayn is the plural of Aina. So, in a very important thing, there's a whole book written on blackness and Islam by Sheikh. What's his name? Uh, Dr. What's his name? What's his name? Abdullah Ali bin Hamid. Right. It's very important to understand. So we have to understand that in a pre-industrial world, right, working is a bad thing, and being lazy is a good thing. Right. So post-industrial revolution, working hard is a good thing. Right. But being lazy and being overweight and having fair skin are all socioeconomic results of being wealthy. So everybody wants to be as pale skin as possible because if you are pale skin, you are not exposed to the sun. Okay, so you look at, for example, a picture of I remember that there's some kind of pasta company, Zara it's called. Like, so the lady has like, she's like very, very fair skinned and she has blonde hair, right? So why would you do that? Right? Blonde hair, maybe something else about it, but it's like, why would you do that? Because somebody who has dark skin works in the sun. Somebody who has light skin does not work in the sun, right? In America, you have the phrase redneck, right? So that's a white person who works in the sun and gets a burnt neck. So, right? So redneck, you referring to him as a poor white person. So the original reference, it has a slightly different meaning now, but the original reference is the idea that you are poor and you actually have to do manual labor, therefore bad. So in the past, you were attractive if you were wealthy, if you were overweight. Okay, if you are as pale as possible, because that means you don't work in the sun, right? And so, are you trying to say that none of the Hura'in are black, right? So is that part of Aqidah? So it's like there's something wrong with black people. Is that basically what you're saying, right? Like fair skinned is like, well, basically we have to be pale, right? The answer is no, right? But the point is very beautiful, right? And so we have to understand that for them, somebody explaining something, even today, we find that in the East, for example, it's a kind of thing in Pakistan, for example, everybody has to marry somebody who is lighter than them, right? Why? Same thing, socioeconomics. Whereas in other places, for example, for the Inuits, you have to marry somebody who's fatter than you. Okay, why? because if you're fat, you're going to survive, right? We have the word Samina, right? It's a name, Samina, uh, which means which means fat, right? And so that doesn't really translate today. Like, why would you call your daughter Samina? In the past, that means it's a good word, right? Now it means something bad. Okay, so fair-skinned here, that's an explanation, it's not the explanation, right? But the point is beautiful. Ayn is the plural of aina, which is a word used to describe a woman with large eyes. So again, a Chinese person be like, "Oh, that's disgusting. Why would you have large eyes?" Right? So if you look at traditional pictures of, in China of the rest of the world, we look like aliens with big fat eyes. It look really horrible, right? So the point is, beautiful eyes, right? That's the point, right? The prepondering meaning in the word ayn is that so we have that you use it for gazelles, and ayn means gazelles or like small gazelles, right? That it refers to women whose eyes contain attributes of beauty and elegance. That's the point, right? Muqatil, again, one of the early Mufassirin, contended that the word ayn refers to women with beautiful eyes, right? Abdullah Mas'ud, he said, the marrow beyond the flesh and bone of the calves of the large-eyed maidens can be seen from under 70 garments, just as clearly as one can see a red drink in a clear glass. Exalted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the exalted Allah said, uh, in all gardens there will be noble, pleasant mates. Khayrat is the plural of khayra, which is an abbreviated form of the word khayyira, in the same way the word sayyida and layyina are abbreviated, right? Sayda and layna. Hisan is the plural of hasana, beautiful. So khayrat, hisan means those women who have pleasant attributes, amiable characters and dispositions, as well as beautiful faces. He, the Exalted Subhanahu wa Taala, said, they will be maidens. They will be maidens with gorgeous eyes, reserved in pavilions. Right. So it says maqsuratun. So again, this is a very, very important thing. Part of the description. So part and parcel of patriarchy in the dunya is controlling women, meaning sexually controlling women, meaning the woman is not sexually active elsewhere. And part and parcel of that is controlling movement and controlling freedom. So this is a really, really important thing, particularly as Westerners, to understand, right? Is that there is nothing beautiful and attractive about a woman who is sleeping around, who is sleeping with lots of different people. To be attracted to a woman who is of loose morals and she is available for more than one man is it goes against the grain of the man's DNA. It goes against the grain of patriarchy, goes against the grain of the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for society to function. Right? It's like being attracted to women who kill their children. Right? Imagine, for example, that if a woman was known to kill her babies, you found her attractive. Like that's weird. So we live in a world where people are attracted, not people in general, some people are attracted to debauched women. And being a woman who sleeps around, there's no problem with that. It's part of your power, it's part of your freedom, it's a part of your sex appeal, something that makes you actually attractive to some people, right? Whereas in reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks in Jannah that limiting women and women who are limited to you, who are preserved for you as a man, this is something that is good. This is something that is Allah's telling you is something amazing. So this is very important to understand that as a woman, as a Western woman, uh, is we have to have in Western women, we have to have in our minds like the more limited I am to my husband, and the less access men have to me, the better it is. So being in the workplace is halal. Being in the workplace is not Islamic. Why? Because men have access to see me. They can talk to me. And that takes away my value. It takes away my value, right? And so it's something to avoid. It's something that this is, like you say, this is the economic reality of living in 21st century. And women have to work most of the time. That's just how it is. But that's not the perfect picture, right? So if you think, let's say, for example, let's look at Friends, right? Is everyone familiar here with Friends, the sitcom? Ahmed Sharifa and ZB. Can everyone hear me? Right. You feel what I'm talking about? So it's funny. Uh, it was funny. I mean, it doesn't exist anymore, right? It was funny. Good-looking actors. Uh, Nothing horrible happening, right? The picture that's given to us is this is America at its best. Like people are free. There's no kids to waste our time. People are attractive, but nothing really bad happening. Like what's wrong with that? Like what's wrong with Friends? Like what's wrong with, for example, this mixing, right? What's wrong with, for example, whoever this person, they're on a cover of a magazine and they're working for shampoo adverts and da da da. Like, what's wrong with a woman sharing her beauty? What's wrong with a woman sharing her life with males, like as a friend? Like, what's wrong with that? The answer is it goes against patriarchy, right? It goes against patriarchy. It goes against the whole system because a woman who is available for more than one man is not is not female material, right? It's like a husband that, for example, let's say, for example, there's a man, he's very muscular, strong, very handsome. When he speaks, he has a very, very, very high voice, like ridiculously high voice. There's something off about it, like it just doesn't make sense, like something off. There's a thing about a man's deep voice that is attractive to women because it's a that whole picture of what a man is. And then suddenly his voice is really, really high, and he's really scared of everything, and he can't defend himself on anything, and he doesn't get anything done ever. And then suddenly it's like, well, he's physically there, but everything else about him is just not there. So the whole picture doesn't make sense, right? The whole picture doesn't make sense. So we have to understand that we live in a world where gender is being played with and gender has been played with. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the real picture that at the end of the day, this is actually what men are interested in, and this is what actually women are interested in, right? And so it's like you're actually hardwired to be interested in these things, right? So it's very important to understand it because it's very hard being a Muslim woman in the West because there's very like there's not much gratification in what you do. All you're told is you're just backward continually, and everything about it is people don't praise you. You're not respected for being a mother. You're not respected for doing this, respected for that. It's kind of like you're just like unimpressive because look at you. You're limited and you don't go anywhere and you don't achieve anything and you don't have a PhD and you're not a surgeon and you're not this and you're not that, right? So like there's nothing impressive about it. Whereas other people, they're putting their images out and they look really good and look at their body and look at their achievements and look how popular they are and these things. It's like, oh, so it's like you want to compete because you want to feel that same thing, like I want to be somebody. But in reality, it's like, no, be what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to be and be what a normal man, even if your husband is a bit odd and is interested in other things or doesn't really care. For example, your husband doesn't really care if you socialize with men. It's like that's fine. But at least, I'm keeping my worth as a woman, right? This is a key thing, like keeping your worth as a woman, right? It's a super important thing. So the other person who interacts with men the least, right? You're the person who is preserves their beauty for the husband the most, whether or not one's husband is actually values that or even says anything about it or not. It doesn't matter. Just like a man, your wife doesn't ask you to fix things, doesn't ask you to guide the kids, doesn't really care about anything. But there's a certain roles that a man should do, and you're like, no, I should fix things. I should get stuff done. I don't know, like think about what's happening with the kids and where's the big direction, right? Give structure to things as opposed to just sit there, even if I'm not even being asked, or even though she doesn't really seem to care whether I get involved or not, right? Because there are certain things that this is what men do. And whether this particular individual is going to ask me to do it or not, I'm not trying to show off to my wife and trying to show off to Allah that I'm doing my job as his slave. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us some of these pictures here, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, and they will be confined. So confine yourself as much as possible and keep your femininity. Right? Don't be the person who is out there in front of everybody. Um, unless you have a choice and you need to work, there's no one else to do the job, right? No one else is running the masjid. What am I supposed to do, right? The board is just falling apart and there's only me. I don't have time and because my husband works and I need to do these things. Okay, fine. Right. Sometimes there's things that have to be done. What can you do about it? Right. Aisha radiallahu anha, she went into battle. Right. Did she want to? No, but she did. Right. Um, they will be confined to their pavilions, never leaving them. Right. So these pavilions will be constructed from pearls and silver. He also said, those maidens will be as elegant as rubies and coral. The Prophet explained the meaning of this in his statement. When one looks upon her face, he will see that her cheeks are clearer than a mirror. The lowest of the pearls that adorn her will be enough to light up everything between the east and the west. Though she will be adorned with 70 garments, his sight will penetrate these garments so that he'll be able to see the core of her calves. The Exalted said, in both gardens will be maidens of modest gaze. So notice modest gaze. So what's wrong with you? Why are you so traumatized as a female Muslim that you can't speak to men? Right? Like there's something wrong with you, basically. Like you're like backward and traumatized, and you don't have any self-confidence. That's what you're told. Right? So no, being somebody who is not seen by women and does not see men, this is part of my femininity. I value it. Allah values it. I don't really care about what you think. Right? So being in the West again is hard because if you don't smile ever, you don't show nice, it sounds like you're upset with everybody. Right? You go to the shop, for example, and you don't smile. Right? That was weird, right? But again, be more reserved than the average Westerner, right? So, coming from England and coming to America, uh, the normal conversation with a female in America is flirtatious. That's like a normal conversation compared to England, right? Um, it doesn't mean anything in principle. It probably does, right? But it doesn't mean anything. But that's just how Americans are. So it's very difficult to be English. You can be English in America and get away with it, but to be like, yeah, no eye contact, um, it's a normal thing to say, hi, how are you doing? Yeah, how can I help you? You work at at a store. What am I supposed to do? Right? I go and buy stuff for people, right? So you have to have a bit of a balance. But the default is, I don't need to talk to my husband's friend or my husband's brother. It's not, there's no need to. And if it's slightly impractical, let it be slightly impractical. It's okay. Right? Restrict interaction as much as possible. Right? And some men will value it, some men won't. Some will find it annoying because they're very Western and like, oh, this is so annoying, so impractical. But at the end of the day, you are keeping your worth, right? So one of the Sahabiyat, for example, she had a question, her husband died, and she had a question, came to the Prophet, she's wearing niqab. And the Sahaba, they're like shocked, like, why are you wearing niqab in front of the Prophet? She said, if I have lost my husband, I haven't lost my hayat. Like, I don't want to be seen by men. Right? I don't want to be seen by men. Right? So they don't not seen by men and they're not seeing other men. Right? So they are qasirat tarf, they're not looking at other men. Right? And this is a very important thing to understand is that men and women look at the opposite sex in a different way. Right? So we have to understand the television is full of sexually loaded images for men, right? The television, meaning, what I mean is television in the scientific sense, the screen, right? The internet, your smartphone, television, right? All of these things. So most of television and most of the screen is like totally haram for men, right? Like totally haram. Forget about it. Like don't even go near it. But for women, it's a slightly different ball game, right? For women, it's a slightly different ball game. There are images that women can see. They're like, oh yeah, that's an image, right? And so to play a game with oneself as a female, like, oh yeah, yeah, it doesn't mean that image doesn't mean anything to you. Yeah, it does mean something to you. Or that character, right, doesn't mean anything to you. It does mean something to you, right? And you are reacting to it a certain way, and there is things happening inside you, like, oh yeah, that's called attraction. It's like you can't look at something like that. It's like, whoops, right? And so, as men, as women, we all have to lower our gaze, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us both in the Quran, lower your gaze. Right? Um, and in the same verse, it says, who no woman or jinn have ever touched before, right? So again, this is a bit more subtle. Is it a praiseworthy thing to be debauched and you sleep around a lot as a female? No, it's not, right? It's not for male or female, but it's particularly not for females. Okay. So, okay, what does that mean then? What if I've been married 3 times? Does it make me like less? I'm less of a woman then? Like, what about Asma bint Umays? She's married to Sayyidina Ali, then married to Sayyidina Abu Bakr, then Sayyidina Ja'far, then Sayyidina Abu Bakr, then Sayyidina Ali. Is like, you're trying to say there's a problem with her? Atika, I think, radiallahu anha, she got married like 5 times. Every single time she marries somebody, her husband dies a shaheed. Marries somebody else, dies a shaheed. Marries us, right? So is that a problem? So you're trying to say that basically a woman who has been married before, there's a problem with her? No, there's nothing wrong with her. I'm not saying that. So that's a bid'ah that we have in the Muslim world, is that women who have been married can never get married again. Right? That's why women, for example, will just sit through a very, very bad marriage because they know that it's better than not being married. Right? Which is very wrong, right? So that's totally wrong. Women should never say, "Oh, I have to deal with domestic violence because, it's better than not being married." That's really, really bad. It's like a huge oppression, right? And there's nothing wrong with a woman who's divorced. There's nothing wrong with a woman whose husband died, right? However, as a perfection, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this, that no human or jinn has ever touched before, even the same person. So basically she will continually always be a virgin each time. Right? That's the point. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if a woman of paradise were to gaze upon the earth, everything in between her and it would become illuminated and filled with a breeze. Likewise, the veil on her head is better than the temporal world and all it contains. Right? Just the hijab that she's wearing, the veil over her head, is better than the whole universe. The Prophet also informed us that the inhabitants of paradise will have multiple spouses. He said there is not a single person in paradise except that they have 2 or more spouses. Right? So this is a really important, really, really important thing to understand. Polygyny. Right? I remember somebody who has more than one wife. He shared this on social media a long time ago. He had a picture of some actor, whatever it was. No, there was a film, Omar, the series Omar came out, and it had Musaylama al-Kadhab in the story. And so it says, quote, from Musaylama al-Kadhab. So it's a Musaylama al-Kadhab, the fake prophet that claimed to be a prophet, etc. And Musaylama al-Kadhab, quote, when a man falls in love with a woman, all other women disappear from his gaze. Quote Musaylim al-Kadhab. So men by nature are polygenic, whatever the word is. Right? So a man that loves a woman does not mean he's not interested in another woman. That's not true. That's just not a reality. It's possible you might find somebody who's just right. But by nature, that's how you are, right? So it's a very important thing for men to understand and for women to understand. So my husband is married to me and he's happily married to me. So I don't understand how he could look at any other woman in the way he looks at me. It's like that's because you don't understand who or what your husband is. That's the nature of your husband. So don't be upset with your husband. I mean, you could be hurt. I can understand, right? But that's just the nature of what a man is. Okay. And so is it a healthy thing to do to limit what a man is, right? It's like the cat is playing with the woolen ball, and you tell the cat, stop playing with the woolen ball. That is what a cat is. Like it's a predator. It plays with things and hunts things. That's what it does, right? Or you tell the dog, sit. Okay, the dog sits, and then the dog wants to go for a run. And you're like, the dog is a domesticated wolf. It is designed to run down prey. So now you're telling the dog to stop moving, right? That's just oppressive. So men by nature are polygamous, whatever the word is, polygynous, polygynous, whatever the word is, from polygyny. They are interested in more than one female. That's by their very nature. And to look at them in any other way is just being immature. It's like looking at a teenager and thinking they're not interested in the opposite sex. Like, what else does a teenager think about? Right? What else do they think about? So it's like you're thinking, oh no, he's not into that kind of thing. It's like, what are you talking about? He's a teenager. Of course he's interested in the opposite sex, right? So that's just the nature of men. So that's why we should do segregation as much as possible. That's why men have to lower their gaze. That's why many things, right? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated polygamy. Now, again, in our times, we come along and say, oh, yeah, but that's under the conditions. What are the conditions Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, it says, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you are concerned that you're not going to be fair, which is a pretty scary thing to do, right? Not being fair between your two wives or three wives or four wives. فَوَاحِدَةً, then have one wife. أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, or any number of concubines. So this key thing in our mind that we have to understand. That 150 years ago, you were in Ottoman Turkey, and your husband has three wives besides you and 10 concubines. That's just life. That's just life. That's just normal. Suddenly today, I mean, we accept it in principle. We expect it, but polygamy is like looked down upon, right? It's like it's kind of weird, right? So when we're reading the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about this again and again and again, and He's telling you about the nature of your husband, the nature of your brother, the nature of your father, the nature of your son. This is what he is. Allah is promising these things to him because this is what he is. This is how he functions. And so it is obviously extremely difficult for a woman to deal with. I'm not saying it's easy, but a wise and mature woman would open the door to these things, right? All things being equal, because they understand what their husband is. They wouldn't be surprised or shocked when they sense, for example, that the husband sees somebody and looks away, or sees somebody and doesn't look away. May Allah protect us and forgive us, right? Because that's just what the man is, right? The adverts put pictures, adverts put pictures of half-naked women to sell things. If your husband was not interested in anybody other than you, that wouldn't be there. They wouldn't invest all that money, right? That's true. That's true. And so it is difficult. It is very difficult. And what is a co-wife called in Arabic? It's called your darra, right? It's called your harm. It's hard. Of course, it's hard. But that doesn't make it real, right? Exactly. So you're looking at, so I'm not talking about yourself, Sister Sharifa. I'm talking about a woman who looks at her son or brother, father. So like you ask your father, like, how could you like basically cheat on mama? That doesn't make any sense. Like that's what he is. Okay, how could your dad, like you've known, like your brother's been married for like 10 years, and then like what's going on? And then like you say they're all happy, and then like, why you even think about second wife? That's crazy. You're crazy. And it's like that's what he is. That's what your son is, right? It's like asking a carnivore not to like meat. It's not me. So there's obviously the pragmatics of life and these things. There's no such thing as concubines anymore. There's no such thing as that you can't, polygamy is very difficult. People can't afford to support one wife, let alone two. Fine, right? The ummah is broken. It's not a good idea. Fine. Kids are going crazy and parents need to be more involved, so you shouldn't have so many kids. Fine. But at the end of the day, fighting the very essence of what something is a fairly stupid thing to do, and you're not going to be very happy with it, right? Or trying to change in your head or change the nature of it, right? That doesn't make any sense. Like it doesn't work, right? And similarly for men to some extent as well. Obviously, that's a different thing. For like, do you honestly think that you fill your wife's eyes, right? Like she doesn't ever notice anybody else. And it's totally fine. You are totally fine with her working 10-hour shifts with a very charming, handsome, cooperative, caring, concerning manager who is totally taking your role on a daily basis. Like you don't have any problems with that, right? This a man who is like that, like, oh yeah, I trust my wife. It's like that doesn't make any sense. Like that's not a normal thing to do. You just don't do that, right? You just don't do that. Right? Oh, they're on a trip together, but obviously they're not going to share rooms. So yeah, like you're okay with your wife going on a business trip with another man, and you're like, yeah, yeah, I trust her. I was like, you don't understand the nature of women. You don't understand. You're just, you have no ghairat, you have no jealousy, and you have no sense, right? So that doesn't make, that's a very silly thing to do, right? Um, But going back to the point is here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning this. So in Jannah, that jealous and emotional side will be gone. You won't have those feelings. But it's important to just understand like that's what it is, right? So it's like you're looking at your husband thinking that he's a herbivore. And he's like, yeah, but when he goes to work, he only eats grass. And he's like, no, when your husband goes to work, he doesn't eat grass. He eats meat. That's what he is. He's a carnivore. That's what you can expect him to do. That's what he is. And so embrace it as opposed to, right? It's like being annoyed with kids. Oh, kids are so annoying. It's like they're supposed to be annoying. I mean, that's called activity. Like you're looking at it as annoying. Oh, they're so, but it's like that's what's cute about them. That's what they do. Like, they'll have lots of energy. Or do you want a kid that doesn't do anything? Like, that's what they are. We call them kids because they act like goats, right? So now you instead of instead of like enjoying this age of here's a kid and they mess around and they do silly things and they forget things and they say things they shouldn't say, whatever. Instead of enjoying it, you're like, you're so annoying. It's like, well, like you're not accepting the very essence of what your child is, right? Or you're like, I have a problem with Allah. I think Allah's a bit proud, to be honest. It's like, what? Like, yeah, he's always talking about how amazing he is. It's like you have a problem with the very essence of what Allah is. Like Allah is amazing, so therefore it is fine for him to be proud. Like he is mutakabbir. That's one of his attributes. Right? Pride is one of Allah's attributes, and it's in the right place. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you have a central problem with that, right? And so we shouldn't be like that. And again, are we expected? Okay, are women expected to be like, oh yeah, okay, thank you for that class. Now I feel fine about it. Of course not, right? Look at the wives of the Prophet and um, look at story of Sayyidina Yusuf. Look at the story of Sayyidina Ibrahim. Look at it's a reality. It's a hard reality. It's difficult, right? The Kaaba is only in the Kaaba because Sarah was jealous. She was like she couldn't deal with it anymore. Like I can't deal with Hajar having a child. I can't deal with this. It's too hard, right? And so, right, so it's a reality. It's a difficult reality, but it's like saying like we have to kill animals. It's difficult to kill animals. If you raised a goat, but you will have to kill it one day and eat it. Or it's hard. It's very difficult, for example, for family to die, but every single person in your family will die, right? And you might bury half of them. That is reality, right? So it's very hard. It's like that means I'm going to bury my wife or she's going to bury me. That's so hard. But yeah, but that is reality though, right? So you can't turn away from it. Anyhow, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about these things. May Allah give us strong iman and try our best. So it says, um, there is not a single person in paradise except that he have two or more spouses. He conveyed to us that these heavenly spouses will convene together. Um, Interesting thing is we look at polygyny as a kind of as a what's the word, patriarchic thing. It is patriarchic for us, but it's not necessarily patriarchic. So what if it was the four women versus one man? Who's going to be in control, right? In terms of power, right? So you can look at it in different ways, right? Depending how you look at it, right? For lionesses, for example, it's a matriarchic system, right? It is actually matriarchic. It's not patriarchic for lions. It is like a mother and her daughters, or a mother and a sister's group, and then they team up, and then a male comes and goes, right? So Allahu A'lam. Anyway, he conveyed to us that these heavenly spouses will convene together every 7 days and speak in melodious voices that no creature has ever heard the likes of, right? Um, were all the eternal ones that we are the eternal ones that never perish. We are the felicitous ones that will never be miserable. We are the content ones that will never be angered. We are the permanent ones that will never go. Glad tidings to those who belong to us and whom we belong to. Right? And the Messenger of Allah said that Jibreel narrated to me and said, when a man meets his hawra, she will greet him with an embrace and a handshake. He told us that the inhabitants of paradise will enjoy sexual relations just as they did in the temporal world, and a believer will be given the sexual power of 100 men. So again, this is a particular thing, in regards to women, is generally speaking, and I don't want to go into details, but generally speaking, this is an issue for women, right? And so part of the paradisical promise for women is that things will be more fulfilling. He also said that after the inhabitants of paradise have intercourse with their women, they will become virgins once again, and that should a man from among the inhabitants of paradise wish for a child, the entire pregnancy, nursing, weaning, and youth will take place in a single moment. There's no difficulties at all, right? And so again, it's important to understand then that intimacy is not something bad, right? In the Islamic paradigm, it's something that's good and it's in its place. It's also been mentioned in a tradition that the inhabitants of paradise will not experience ritual impurity, janaba, weakness, right? Which it says, وَلَنْ حِلَال قُوَّةِ, right? Um, so the word here is, right, weakness or a refractory period after intimate interrelations. The intercourse they will enjoy will consist of pure pleasure and comfort without being accompanied or followed by any discomfort. Those who will experience this is the most those who will experience this in the most complete manner are those who are most completely safe safeguard themselves from the unlawful in this abode. Similarly, anyone who drinks wine in the temporal world will not drink it in the hereafter. Anyone who wears silk in the temporal world will not wear it in the hereafter. Anyone who eats from dishes of gold and silver from will not eat from the here eat from it in the hereafter. Prophet ﷺ said, "It is for them in the temporal world, but for you in the hereafter." So music of the inhabitants of paradise and the singing of the large-eyed maidens. We'll talk about that inshallah next week. Right, so we went on to a bit of a discussion. Inshallah, my wife and I were planning to do a whole class for women and men separately on how the Salaf, the hadiths and Salaf looked at gender and intimacy and these things. Inshallah, we're going to be working on it maybe in a month or so. Um, Inshallah. But there's big things we have to understand. So the problem is that there's so much that's in our heads that's just messed up. So if we're Easterners, we have things that are messed up. If we're Westerners, there's super things that are messed up. And so it's all kind of off, and we have to get things back in line with the Quran and Sunnah, right? And part and parcel of that is actually reading the Quran, right? If we read the Quran in a language that we understood, we would be continually reminded of the basic structure of things. But people either don't read the Quran or they don't read the Quran in a language that they understand. So then it's like just lost on them. They don't read the seerah, they don't read the hadith. So it's just all like well, the basic paradigms that you find in every single thing are just kind of like just not there. Okay, وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحان الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك